With its stunning beaches and fantastic landmarks, California remains one of America's hottest tourist destinations. In star-spangled L.A., people chase their dreams, while San Francisco houses some of the state's most recognizable sights, from the Golden Gate Bridge to Alcatraz Island. But beneath the glitz, the glamour, and the desert heat lies an average of 20,000 unsolved missing persons cases and about 48,000 unsolved deaths. In today's episode, we'll be exploring two horrific unsolved cases from California. Pearl Pinson. Pearl Jean Frances Pinson is described by those who knew her as a loving soul and a girl who loved to laugh. An avid fan of skateboarding, makeup, guns, and roses, and spending time outdoors, Pearl was a pretty average teenager attending Jesse Bethel High School in Vallejo, California, when she went missing one spring morning. On May 25, 2016, just before 7 a.m., 15-year-old Pearl made her way to her nearest school bus stop on foot. While on her way, she reportedly got into an argument with a Hispanic man in a black hoodie who then produced a gun. Witnesses saw the teenager being dragged off to a waiting vehicle. This event unfolded in broad daylight, while Pearl made her way across a pedestrian overpass along Interstate 780 near Taylor Avenue, Vallejo. Reportedly, Pearl's face was bloody, and she was screaming for help. A moment later, the same witness who saw her abduction heard a single gunshot ring out. They dialed 911, but by the time the authorities arrived on the scene, the teenager and the Hispanic man were gone, and very few clues were left behind. All that remained was a blood stain and Pearl's mobile phone. The Hispanic man was soon identified as 19-year-old Fernando Castro. Castro was a petty criminal who'd had a few scuffles with the law, but he had never been involved with kidnapping, murder, or stalking. His family was blindsided by the news that he had been placed at the scene when Pearl vanished. It was initially stated that the two may have known each other, and that Castro was perhaps Pearl's boyfriend. However, investigators were unable to connect the pair in any way. There was no record of them being in contact with one another. 2.5 hours after Pearl disappeared, Castro was seen driving the area of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard near the San Rafael Bridge in Marin County, California. The following afternoon, he was spotted out driving again. Officers with California's Highway Patrol and the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office chased Castro's vehicle into Santa Barbara County. Afterwards, a shootout ensued between law enforcement and the 19-year-old, who was reportedly the first to open fire on the police. Castro was subsequently killed during the shootout. Pearl was not in his vehicle, and the only trace of her was her blood, which was found in the trunk of his car. The teenager was never heard from again. Castro was killed about 300 miles south of where Pearl went missing. The blood found in his car was not enough to indicate to investigators that she was dead or had been seriously wounded. Authorities stated, however, that they couldn't be sure whether she was dead or alive. However, in the time that has now passed, it seems unlikely that she is still alive, but not impossible. Over the next year, there would be 2 reported sightings of the teen, both at Pittsburgh BART station. However, these sightings were disproven. A news article from 2017 states that investigators uncovered new evidence to suggest that she may be alive. Reportedly, the police initially suspected that Castro went to Jenner in Sonoma County shortly after Pearl went missing. After sifting through hours and hours of CCTV footage, they found a 19-year-old on camera at a petrol station near Bodega Bay. The Solano County Sheriff's Office told the media, "There's nothing at this point, even 9 months later, that would suggest Castro killed Pinson." Despite the optimism of investigators at the time, there has been no trace of Pearl in the years since. One of the main theories in this case is that the missing teen became a victim of sex trafficking. However, investigators have been unable to find evidence to support this idea. There was no evidence that anybody other than Castro was involved. Still, Pearl's older sister, Rose, believes this may be what happened to her sibling. In early 2021, Rose followed up on an alleged sighting of a teenager who would be 21 if she was still alive, but this lead appears to have died out. Rose tries to keep tabs on the case, but was told in 2019 that it would not be the main focus of the police because there simply wasn't enough information or evidence for them to work from. Ever since then, investigators have failed to keep in touch with the family. Rose states that she can never get a hold of anyone when she calls. 15-year-old Pearl Pinson was last seen making her way across a pedestrian overpass along Interstate 780 near Taylor Avenue when she was seized by 19-year-old Fernando Castro. The pair had no known relationship prior to the abduction. Pearl is described as a white woman with light brown hair, which was dyed green when she went missing, and blue or green eyes. She is around 5'3" and weighs around 130 pounds. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a black and white zip-up jacket, a gray sweatshirt, black leggings or sweatpants in pink, black and white Nike turf shoes. She also had on a black Raiders beanie hat. Pearl was carrying a black and turquoise backpack with a Joker emblem on it when she was last seen. Her Charlie Project page lists that she may be in need of medical attention for unspecified reasons. If Pearl is still alive, she will be 21 years old. Fernando Castro was a Hispanic male who drove a gold four-door 1997 Saturn with the license plate number 5XCD385. If you have any information about Pearl's case, you can contact the Solano County Sheriff's Office. Maitrice Richardson, an intelligent and accomplished young woman. Maitrice Richardson was born on April 30th, 1985 to Lattice Sutton and Michael Richardson. The couple had a tumultuous relationship, which ultimately ended in them parting ways, and Maitrice was largely raised by her mother and stepfather, Larry Sutton, in Covina, California. After attending South Hills High School and successfully graduating, Maitrice went on to gain a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology in 2008 from California State University in Fullerton. In 2009, she was an intern for a forensic psychologist and was a part-time employee of an LGBTQ+ strip club. According to some reports, Maitrice had split from her girlfriend of 2 years at the time of her disappearance. On the evening of September 16th, 2009, 24-year-old Maitrice entered Jeffrey's restaurant in Malibu, and as she ate a steak and drank a cocktail, began exhibiting what staff described as bizarre behavior. She attempted to join another nearby table talking unintelligibly about astrological signs. She then returned to her own seats to eat, but joins the table again later, announcing that she planned to go to Hawaii and informing the group that she would contact them once she was there. Shortly afterwards, the group, who found her odd but not rude or irritating, left. Maitrice attempted to leave too, but was stopped by the manager, who questioned her about how she intended on paying her $89 bill. Maitrice claimed that the group should have paid for her, but the staff explained that they hadn't. The 24-year-old then made a comment about settling the debt with sex and something about how she was from the planet Mars. While looking for any cash she may have on her, Maitrice emptied out her pockets and pulled out a joint. At this point, the staff at the restaurant called the police, noting, quote, "She sounds really crazy. She may be on drugs or something." The L.A. County Sheriff's Department responded to call and assessed her condition. After administering a sobriety test, they determined that she was neither intoxicated nor under the influence of any drugs. Maitrice was subsequently arrested on charges of suspicion of not paying for the meal and possession of less than 1 ounce of marijuana. According to the arresting officers, the 24-year-old's possessions, including her mobile phone, handbag, and cash, were secured in her car before they left the scene. The car was then towed to a tow yard on Pacific Coast Highway. Maitrice was detained and booked at the Lost Hills Sheriff Station, about 10 miles up Malibu Canyon. Following her arrest, Maitrice attempted to call her great-grandmother 4 times. It was the only phone number she had memorized. Police officers stated that they heard her having a conversation, but Maitrice told them that the phone never rang, as the calls had been carried out on a non-recording line. Because the regular payphone used had broken down, there's no way of knowing which party was correct here. When Maitrice's mother caught wind of her daughter's imprisonment, she became very concerned. However, staff at the station reassured her that the 24-year-old would not be let out until the morning. However, that isn't what occurred. At 12:28 a.m., Maitrice was released. She had none of her possessions, was in an area she was unfamiliar with, and had no way of getting home. A spokesman for the police stated that she had been released because she exhibited no signs of mental illness or intoxication. The young woman also reportedly declined to wait in the lobby. Several hours later at 6:30 a.m., retired news anchor Bill Smith spotted the 24-year-old in his garden. Smith resided in Montanito, a community of private hiking trails and horse properties at the bottom of Dark Canyon, about 6 miles west of the Lost Hill Station. Smith opened his window to ask if she was okay, and Matrice told him that she was resting. He called the police afterwards, but the 24-year-old was gone by the time they arrived. Her mother immediately knew that something was wrong, but officers at the station told her to wait a few more hours before reporting her missing. It wasn't until the early afternoon of the 17th that a be on the lookout alert was issued from Matrice. But Matrice was nowhere to be found, and no trace of her was discovered in the months following her disappearance. After she went missing, her family attempted to gain access to the tape from her jail cell, but Captain Thomas Martin of the LASD told them there wasn't. There is no videotape of any kind, he would later tell the media. However, for months later, in January 2010, Martin admitted that actually the tape did exist. It was in his desk drawer. Notably, by the end of that month, the captain had been promoted and transferred to a station over an hour away. A further 3 months passed before the family were finally able to view the videotape. This was, according to the police, due to technical delays. Lattice recalled watching the footage and noting her daughter seemed agitated and distressed. According to the family, the tape had been edited. This left them wondering what had been cut out of the original recording. Reportedly, in one moment, Matrice was seen holding a piece of paper, and in the next, it was crumpled on the floor. The LASD never clarified why the video had been edited. However, this incident was just one in a string of bizarre and suspicious actions taken by the police during the course of the investigation into Matrice's disappearance and subsequent death. While watching further footage of Matrice, which showed her exiting the station, the family noticed a deputy leave just 2 minutes after her from another door. Nobody at the LASD would reveal the man's name, though. Matrice's father, Michael, stated, "Of course it makes me suspicious. The guy leaves the building right after my daughter, and they don't tell us anything about him. He could have abducted her, offered her a ride to the impound lots, left her for dead, and come back for her. Maybe he didn't see her. The point is, why have they been hiding him? It's their job to get off their donut-eating asses and find the truth." A journalist for LA Magazine, Mike Kessler, was able to uncover this officer's name. The man was apparently transferred less than 6 months after Matrice's family had viewed the footage of him exiting the building. When approached by Kessler, the man told him, "Unfortunately for you, dude, I wasn't there." He then hung up the phone. Kessler was determined, however, and managed to speak to the officer again. This time the man claimed that he couldn't recall being at the department that night. He told Kessler, quote, "The night this nonsense happened, I was one of the guys that kept away from this, minding my own business." On January 9th, 2010, a search was carried out by the LASD. It was one of the largest scale searches in the history of the department. Over 300 volunteers trained in search and rescue operations participated, exploring 18 square miles of Malibu Canyon. Both air and ground searches were carried out, and the volunteers examined creeks, trails, and ridges. Later that year, on June 5th and 6th, more searches were carried out with over 100 private citizen volunteers taking part. Still, Matrice's location eluded searches. Just after 12 p.m. on August 9th, 2010, rangers in Dark Canyon, who had been checking on a marijuana farm that had recently been cleared by law enforcement, stumbled across Matrice's remains. There were no official footpaths in the area, and it was extensively covered in poison oak and awkward boulders, as well as other irritable plant matter. Matrice's body lay upslope from a creek bed. Her remains appeared mummified. The rangers quickly called the police. At 1:30 p.m., a Lost Hills deputy arrived at the scene. It was almost 3 p.m. by the time the coroner was notified, even though he should have been informed immediately. At around 5 p.m., the coroner was sent from an area above the canyon to the Lost Hills station to wait for an airlift, and by 5:20 p.m., 2 detectives had been airlifted to the crime scene. A further 1 hour and 40 minutes passed while the coroner awaited the helicopter. The police later said that the airlift had been delayed while the helicopter was used to help search for a missing hiker. At 8 p.m., as the sun began to set, Mitra's remains were collected by detectives and airlifted back to the station. This was against the direction of the Assistant Chief Coroner, Ed Winter, and the state code on the matter, which stated that a body shall not be disrupted or moved from position or place of death without permission of the coroner or the coroner's appointed deputy. In total, the LASD had access to the remains for over 6.5 hours before they moved them without the approval of the coroner. A veteran of the LAPD, who was interviewed by LA Magazine, bluntly commented that the act of moving the body from the scene without the coroner's permission was, quote, ass backwards. He noted that law enforcement's job is to protect the crime scene. You never move a body without permission. The rangers who had first found the body had taken photographs, and they passed them on to the coroner. These have never been publicly released, but a source close to the investigation told the LA Magazine writer, Mike Kessler, that Mitra's right leg sat 2 yards upslope from her body. The femur bone had been removed as if it had been pulled out, not by animals, leaving behind a channel through the soft tissue. It was nothing short of bizarre. Adding to the strangeness of the scene, one of her arms had been positioned in such a way that it defied gravity, indicating that it had been placed there and kept in position for some time after her death. It has been suggested by a forensic anthropologist named Klearkoff that this was a result of Mitra's body being wrapped up in something after her death. But more oddities were about to reveal themselves. Lieutenant Michael Rawson, who supervised the investigators on the LASD's behalf, claimed that the coroner staffer gave permission for the detectives on the scene, Dan McElderry and Kevin Acavito, to move the skull and assess what lay underneath. Rawson alleged that the skull was attached and, quote, the whole skeleton remains intact, came up with the skull. However, this reportedly doesn't match what is shown in the crime scene photos. The images reveal that the skull was already severed from the body. It was lying upside down, without its mandible on the upper torso. Furthermore, 5 neck bones were missing from the body when it was moved. They have never been found. It is unknown if Rawson and Captain David Smith, who cooperated the story, were present at the time the body was moved. No other officers, including the detectives on the scene, have been made available for comments. Mike Kessler reached out for comments and was met with Lost Hills Captain Joseph Stephen, who wrote, "The harassing nature of your attempted contact with my staff is becoming very troubling and again must cease immediately. We will not and cannot discuss this case with you." The LASD spokesperson said the department has absolutely nothing to hide, adding that when journalists contact them, they get unnerved. Despite the general strangeness of Mitra's case, the LASD did not believe that a crime had occurred. They suggested that she was allergic to poison oak and had an extreme reaction, or that she wandered into the area and was bitten by a rattlesnake, becoming one of the 2 people who die each year in California from the wound left behind. They also proposed that animals had taken the 24-year-old's clothing. Only her bra, belt, and jeans had been left behind, found near to her body. If animals had taken her clothing, it would mean that they also unfastened her bra, unbuckled her belt, pulled it from the loops on her jeans, dragged down her jeans and underwear, and ran off with her shoes. The list goes on, and it doesn't appear to be convincing. Another officer suggested that her clothing was removed by the currents of the water. But again, this doesn't explain how her bra came unhooked or her belt became separated from her jeans. If this was the case, it would also mean that the water rose 60 feet above the creek bed and then pushed the body in the opposite direction of the current in order to deposit it where it was located, on the slope above the creek. Another question that has arisen in this case is how Mitra's remains came to be partially mummified. How had they not fully decomposed in the heat? After 11 months, her body should have been completely skeletonized. Mummification generally results in the body being put in sub-freezing or extremely dry environments immediately after death and for a prolonged period of time. Forensic anthropologist Klearkoff, who noticed Mitra's posed arm, told LA Magazine, "You got the naked body of a woman who you know was in a vulnerable state within 2 miles of where she was last seen in an area with which she had no expertise in an unexplained position. Usually, the default move would be to consider this a homicide, at least until you can rule it out. On the face of it, she was killed. It sounds like someone abducted her, killed her, and at some point dumped her body." The LASD sheriff at the time, Lee Baca, however, disagreed. He stated at a press conference, "This seems like a particularly odd thing to say when we examine the fact that the coroner's office appears to also have been negligent in its duties. Hair that was found near my mitra's body on the ground was not tested. It is unclear if it belongs to the 24-year-old or if it came from someone else. Furthermore, an earring that mitra's hadn't been where it was found in the hair on her scalp, as well as some kind of metallic debris. But neither were tested. Though bug egg casings were found on the remains, the casings were not examined further. It is unknown if they were from a native insect that lived in the area or if they'd come from somewhere else. Mitra's pubic hair was left untested for foreign DNA or semen. Both the vegetation around her body and her clothing was not examined, and neither her brain nor her skull were thoroughly investigated for trauma. While the 24-year-old's teeth reportedly appeared pink, which was a sign of strangulation, this couldn't be confirmed. Because the hyoid bone remained missing, along with the other neck bones as mentioned earlier. The area was searched for a second time 6 months after the body was found, but has not been looked at again since. One of her fingers was found by friends and family, who went to the scene to set up a memorial in the months after mitra's demise. In December 2010, Sheriff Baca announced that the FBI planned to examine mitra's remains. However, it soon emerged that they did not plan to do this and had never agreed to do so prior to Baca's announcement. Still, on July 13, 2011, the body was exhumed and taken to the LASD crime lab, but it is unclear what came from this examination of the body. In such a strange case, it seems that anything could be possible. Mitra's may have had a mental break and wandered off into the wilderness, or something more sinister could be afoot. Perhaps the police are attempting to cover themselves because they have been responsible for a mentally unstable young woman and dropped the ball. Or perhaps there is more to it than that. Evidence in my mitra's diaries and text messages revealed that she was bipolar and had not slept in 5 days at the time of her disappearance. It is likely she was suffering terribly when she was released from the Lost Hill station that September night. Letice, the 24-year-old's mother, believes she met with foul play. "My Teresa is not a hiker," she said. "My daughter is a city girl. She did not wander into that canyon. I believe she was suffering from mental illness, and somebody took advantage of that. I believe she was possibly raped, definitely killed, and eventually dumped." An independent investigation into the LASD's handling of the case revealed that they had done nothing wrong, and so no action was taken against the department. Following the discovery of mitra's body, however, both parents sued the LASD for releasing the young woman. They each received $450,000. mitra's case is still unsolved, and a $10,000 reward was recently reinstated. Anyone with information on mitra's death can contact the LASD at 213-229-1700. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculations. And remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.